Welcome. In this short video, we're going to do a brief overview of getting started with Personal Historian. Personal Historian is software that runs on your Windows or Mac computer that helps you write a personal history. Now, you can write a personal history using a word processor, but you end up with a big, bulky, cumbersome file that makes it hard to find what you're looking for, makes it hard to figure out where to add that new story that you just remembered and things like that. Personal Historian gets around this by breaking your personal history into individual stories. You just go write a story, and Personal Historian takes care of everything, putting it into the right place for you and organizing it and filtering it for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. This is the screen that you would see when the program first starts. And the first thing it wants to know is, who is this history about? In this case, I'm going to select myself. I could write a story about myself, my own autobiography, for example, or I could write a history of another person's life. That could be an ancestor or relative or somebody else, or a group. If there's a group or an organization that you want to write a history for, you'd select that option. So I'm going to go ahead and select myself. And for the purposes of this demo, my name is Ron Stewart. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Personal Historian asks me for the name of my file and the location to save it. I'm just going to use the default, but you can change them if you want. And now it's asking if I want to import my genealogy. This can be useful if you have your data already in a genealogy program like RootsMagic. You've already entered this person's birth and death and burial and occupation and religion, and whatever other pieces of information that you know about them, you've already entered them. You've also already entered that same type of information about all the other important people in this person's life, their parents, their siblings, their spouse, their children, and so on. So if you were to import your genealogy, it would actually create a bunch of skeleton stories with the basic information for those people. Now, we have another video just like this specifically on importing my genealogy. So I'm actually going to not do it. I'm just going to skip that. If you're planning on importing your genealogy, watch the other video and it will go into all the details on how to do that and what the options are for that. Okay, more about me. This is where you just fill in a little bit more information. The important one is this birth date. If you happen to know the birth date, it's really important to enter that here because Personal Historian uses that birth date to calculate ages on all of the stories. Okay, now it's asking me to import life capsules. Now, life capsules are pretty cool. They are individual files that will let you import a bunch of stories. Now, those stories might be historical stories. We have life capsules for U.S. history, one for British history, Canadian history, Australian history, and so on. And if you select those, it will import historical events that happened within that person's life. We also have soft history type of life capsules, which would be things like songs, movies, TV shows, which will contain those types of items and the date that they came out. Now, these are useful because they help you add context to the person's life, important historical events that happened within their life, or can actually help trigger memories of things. A particular song might trigger a memory about some event that happened within your life or within another person's life. So that's what life capsules are. We do have a video specifically on life capsules that goes into all those details. So I am going to not import life capsules right here. I'm not going to go through that, take the time to do that. But if you are interested in those life capsules, watch the video on using life capsules with Personal Historian. Okay, our file is ready. Click Done. And we're now sitting here on a blank Personal Historian screen. This area right here is where the stories, the outline, the timeline of the stories will be added. As you add a story, it will create a timeline for each story right here. So let's go ahead and do one. I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to say I want to add a story. Now, when I add a story, I have a bunch of options up here, and then I have an area here where I can actually write the story. It's just like a word processor. And then we have an organizer I'll mention briefly in a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter a title for my story. My title for this story is going to be My First Date. Now you'll notice that I didn't pick my birth. You know, when you're writing a personal history in a word processor, you basically start from as early as you can remember and start working through. With personal historian, you just start writing about whatever it is you remember about at the time, and it will take care of organizing everything for you. So I could say my first date, I go down here to age, and I'm going to say I was about 16 on my first date. And personal historian will fill out the date. It's basically using it based on the birth date. Now I might look at that and say, well, it was actually in April, so I can come over here and I can change this to April. So you can enter the date or the age, either one, and it will adjust the other one to include that. So my first date, I'm going to go ahead and start writing about it now. I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to put my first date was a disaster. Sandra was the cute girl who sat in front of me in history class. Now I could continue to write more about that, but rather than do that, I'm going to go copy and paste it from Word over here. And there we go. Now that's really handy, being able to copy and paste from a word processor or another editor. If you've already been working on a personal history in some file like that, it's very easy to just go copy that and then paste it into, copy that story and then paste it here into this particular editor here. Now, you have all kinds of things that you can do with this editor. You know, you have styles, you have fonts, bold, italics, underline, you have justification, you can add pictures, spell check, thesaurus. You have a bunch of other options up in here to choose from as well. Now, rather than go through all of those individual features, we also have a video that's dedicated solely to writing a story in Personal Historian. And in that video, we cover all of these cool functions, including ones where you can actually just talk and it will type what you say right into the editor for you there. Okay, we can also assign a category or assign this story to a category. So I click on categories and it pops up and it says there are no categories. We don't have any categories created. So I'm going to add a new category, and it's going to be called My Teen Years. And then I can choose an icon for that, and I'll just choose a flag. Okay, and so now I have a category assigned. Now I can actually assign a story to more than one category. If I click here, I can go add another one and add it to multiple categories. So I could create another category, for example, called Private, and then assign this story to both My Teen Years and Private, which I can then use to filter. So if I filtered Private, it would hide this particular story. Okay, I can also do that with People and Places, but we have a video that goes into detail about how to use categories, people, and places, and use them in the filters and everything else. Now the organizer, I mentioned I was going to mention this. The organizer is really useful. It's a very powerful tool, but it's really easy to use. Most of the time, at least for me, when I come into a particular story, I get here, I sit here and I try to think, what is it I'm going to write about? I mean, what are the things I want to write about, and what order do I want to write them, and how do I word everything? And it's kind of a writer's block type of thing, but that's where the organizer helps me, is I can come over here and I can just add a bunch of items. I just brainstorm and I can just put every little item I can think of, and then it makes it easy for me to organize it into an outline. And once I have that outline, it makes this very, very easy to write. We do have a video on using the organizer and creating an outline in Personal Historian. So take a look at that particular video. to learn more details about how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And I now have my first story saved. It's in progress. I have my title, the date, the age, the category, and then I have a little timeline thing over here, and that becomes more useful as you get as you get more stories written. It kind of shows you where within the person's lifetime that particular story occurred. So let's go ahead and add another story. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to add a story, and this story is going to be called Getting a New Puppy. And I was 9 when I got that new puppy. No, let's say I was 6 when I got that new puppy. And let's go ahead and instead of writing it again, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to copy and paste my story in there. So there's my story about having my puppy. Now I'm going to come up here. I'm going to put the cursor at the beginning of the story. And then I'm going to click on Picture. On Pictures, and it's going to ask me what picture do I want to use, and I want a picture of this puppy right here. And there's my puppy picture. Now I'm going to resize that, make it a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to say I want the picture to be here with everything over to the right of it. Whoop, and that's all there is to it. I can do the same thing, make it over on the right side or on the left side, either way. So you can kind of position where you want the pictures to show up. I can come up here to categories, and getting a new puppy wasn't in my teen years. I'm going to add a new category, and I'm going to call this the early years. And I'm going to choose that, and I'll go ahead and use a smiley face for that. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And I now have 2 stories written. And you'll notice that even though I wrote my first date story first, Personal Historian knows that the dates, because I've put the dates in there, so it's organizing them chronologically. It's actually creating a timeline of my stories. And there's no limit to the number of stories you can write. You can go in and write as many stories as you want. When you figure that a story is finished, you can go in and edit that, and you can edit it by either highlighting it and clicking the edit button up here, or just double clicking on the story. And if I decide this story's done, I'm finished with this, I can come over here to status, and I can change the status to completed. Save that. And so now it's showing that the status is complete. The status on this one is still that it's in progress. And you can come over here and filter just by checking and unchecking to have you show or hide particular stories. Okay. So let's go ahead now, and I'll mention a couple of things up here on the toolbar. There's the filter. That lets you filter these kind of like I was showing you. It's a more sophisticated version of these filters here. Add story, that's what we've done a couple of times. If I want to get rid of one of these stories, I can highlight a story and click this button right here to delete the story. This one edits the story. This one randomly edits a story. So instead of going to a specific story and then clicking edit, this just brings up a random story for you to edit. That's useful if you're wanting to work on a story, you're wanting to type in something but you aren't really sure what you want. It starts making suggestions. And then this button is to create a new journal entry. And what all that really does is it's like adding a new story and putting today's date in it. So if you want to use Personal Historian to keep a journal, you can do that as well. You just click on Add a Journal Entry, and it opens up an entry for you to type in today's, and it automatically has today's date in it. Okay, so finally, this is the last thing I want to talk about in this brief overview, is managing books. Now, you can add as many stories as you want, but what you're going to find is that when it comes time to print it, you may want your book to be a little bit different depending on who you're giving it to. So for example, if you want to create a book for your grandchildren, you may want to leave some of the stories out. You may want to simplify certain things. On the other hand, if you're giving it to your siblings, there's other stories you may want to include, but there's other stuff you might not want. If you're doing personal history just for the general public. You may have some private stuff that you don't want to show up. And so each of these books is a little bit different, even though they use these same stories. And that's where this comes in really nice, is you can create multiple books with multiple criteria, parameters, whatever, so that you can create, just with a click, several different types of books, even all based from that same data. So I'm going to go to add a new book, and it already has a title filled in, although I can change that, and then I can enter a subtitle. The legend continues. The author, Ron Stewart. The publisher, Stewart Press. The published year, published place. Just fill in whatever you need on that. Click next. Which special sections do you want to include in this book? You have cover page, title page, copyright, dedication, acknowledgments, preface, and table of contents. Pick whichever you want. If you later decide you don't want something you selected or vice versa, you can always change it. This is just a wizard to kind of get you started. Which stories do you want to include? All the stories, or do you want to only show ones that are currently visible? If you filtered some out and you don't want those to show up in your book, you can choose that. I'm going to say all stories since I only have 2. And how do I want to organize my stories? If I choose single chapter, basically what that means is no chapter. It means it's just going to print stories. It's just going to start with the first one and go down and print one at a time, just one story after the other, not breaking it up into any chapters. If I select age, what that's going to do is let me have my chapters based on the person's age at that time, using that age right there. And so I can choose how many chapters, and then I can choose what ages I want. So I could, for example, I might choose age 0 through 5, for my first chapter, kind of when they're little. I might choose 6 through 10. That might work okay for grade school type age. And then I might have one for junior high. I might have one for high school, and so, ages, whatever. Now, me personally, I use categories just because that's the way I like them. That doesn't make it right. That's just the one I like. And what that does is makes each one of your categories a chapter. So if I were to do this, I would have a chapter called The Early Years with any stories that I put in that category in that chapter. And I would have a chapter called My Teen Years with all the stories that I've written and put in that category in that. And then I might have categories called College and the Married Life and, the Golden Years, whatever. I can do that. Now, these categories also don't have to be time-based like Early Years, My Teen Years. They don't have to be based on a chronological type of thing. You can have categories like education, family, things which are more of a subject, and any story you write that has to do with your education, you put them in the education category. Then when you print a book, you're going to have a chapter called My Education, and it will have all the stories about your education, whether that's kindergarten or working on your PhD. It's everything that's within that category. You have some options here. You tell it to create the book, and Personal Historian then opens up this screen. That wizard we stepped through basically let us kind of quick and dirty put things together. This is where we can actually go customize everything on this book. We can customize the layout, the margins, the header, the footer. We can customize how we want indexes to look. We can customize the fonts. We can go to each individual chapter and change the font, change the text for each chapter. Now, one thing you'll notice is right here, when I did this by category, it put My Teen Years and the Early Years in this order. Now, most likely, I want the early years to appear before the teen years. So it's important to look and just take and click and drag that. You can drag these chapters into the right order, into whatever order you want. So if you're doing it by chapters, this is where you can decide what order you want those chapters to appear in. Once you've done that, you choose Publish Book. And I need to shrink this down here. You publish the book, and it opens up the print preview. There's your cover page. There's your title page. Here's your table of contents. It created that for me. I didn't have to do anything except say that I wanted a table of contents. It puts the calculates the page number. There's the early years and my teen years. Here's the early years. There's that first story, getting a new puppy. If I had other stories in the early years, those stories would follow along right here. My teen years, here's my first date, and as the date that happened. Go on, and if I had told it that I wanted an index, I would have an index as well, using the people and the places that are within that book. Now, once I'm happy with this from here, I can print it, I can save it, I can email it to somebody, but I'm just going to go ahead and close it for now. And the first time I close it, it asks, what is the name of this book? And I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that. And I now have this book. At any time, I can come into the books, highlight that one, select edit, and publish. I don't have to go through regenerating any of this again. I just go through here and publish. And if I've added new stories to these categories, they're automatically included when I publish that book. Okay, and so that is a quick overview of getting started with Personal Historian. Now what I recommend is go check out those other videos where we go into more detail on these individual subjects, on all the details about writing a story and all the options that are there, how to import your genealogy data, how to use life capsules, how to filter the various stories. So take a look at those videos, and we hope you enjoy writing your personal history.